Welcome back to the show. Welcome back to the podcast, Indestructible Souls, Mental Wellness for African American Men and Boys. It is Sunday, June 13th. This is season 3, episode 4. And today we're going to be talking about athletics and mental health. But before we get there, as usual, I want to plug a couple of things real quick. The first thing I want to talk about is our weekly Wednesday group, Hearts of Men, mental wellness group for African American men moving forward together. We meet every Wednesday at 7 o'clock via Zoom. If you're interested, you can register for free on Eventbrite, or you can send us an email at heartsofmen@beauregardtherapy.com. Also, I represent Beauregard Therapy. I'm located in the city of Colton, California. You can also check me out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and you can see more about my profile on Psychology Today. And a special event coming up, the group Hearts of Men will be joining Sister Circle for a Father's Day edition, June 26th at 9 a.m. You can also sign up for that on Eventbrite. That's 9 a.m. on June 26th. We will have a really in-depth discussion you won't want to miss. Now, let's get to it. So today we're going to start a 3-part series on athletics and mental health. And there's several reasons why we chose to do this topic, but particularly as the COVID and as quarantine is ending, we're seeing a lot of kids getting back to athletics, and which is a great thing. But we're also have seen a lot of college athletes, professional athletes who have been talking a lot about mental health. So in our 3-part series, we're going to, and I say we, me and my partner Jerome, and I'm going to add him in a second. Just wanted to intro really quick. We're sort of going to take you on a journey and why mental health is so important when we talk about athletics, and understand that when it comes to athletics and mental health, it is a two-edged sword. There's positive, it builds character, and all of those things. But at the same time, as people begin to progress or get older, and even college athletes, professional athletes, sometimes we put professional athletes on a pedestal and we think they're superheroes and they're no longer human. And when their mental health affects them and affects us, we don't understand why. And so, athletes are held to a different standard. So without a further ado, I'm going to add in Jerome Washington, and we're going to have a really good discussion about, so you can learn how mental health and athletics go hand in hand. What's going on?
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Let's get it started.
So let's get it started. So, are you typing?
No, just actually trying to wind up my cables and everything and make sure I'm on point so we can do this. So,
all right,
I'm ready.
So let's just kind of talk about real quick how athletics have played a part in both of our lives. And so why is this important? Because so many kids, both male and female, athletics can be, for me, it could pay for education. It could It has a lot to do with health.
Right.
It definitely can build self-esteem and confidence and so forth, especially starting off at an early age. So how did athletics play a role in your life real quick?
I just think in my life period, I think it plays such a big role because it had to do a lot with just personal growth. Um, I can say for kids today, if they don't get a chance to play sports, one thing you're missing out on is it's probably the best teacher next to another object that I'll mention later that teaches them about life. I mean, there's nothing more you can learn out of sports that's not in life. I mean, you're talking about winning and losing, doing your best and getting where you want to be. Not doing your best, not getting where you want to be. Shoot, sometimes doing your best and it doesn't go the way you want it to. But that's life. Sometimes you have to bounce back. And you hear a lot of people in sports, they say, well, sometimes, you gave it your best effort and you lost. That's just life. That's exactly what it is. It's life. So it teaches them education, it teaches them perseverance, it teaches them resilience, it teaches them habits that they need to take on through life, through work, with other people, with themselves, with family. So
Right.
it's I mean, it's the best, like I said, it's the best predictor of life there is.
It teaches so many social skills, and I'll use, even to this day, even though I don't play sports anymore, obviously I'm old, but the mentality and the characteristics and all that stuff that you just mentioned, I still live by.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that, and I know we're probably going to talk about a lot of kids that we see in practice, and one of the things I always encourage parents to get their kids in some type of not only sports but athletics and some type of group activity where they can socialize. One of the things that, and I'll pick on video games again real quick, is because, well, here's the reason. One of the things you already mentioned it. Athletics is a microcosm of
Of
real
life.
life.
Yes, it is.
It is a microcosm of life. And so kids who isolate themselves on video games are literally missing out on life development,
Mm-hmm.
like life development. And so one of the things, and I remember as a kid, I was always competitive. My motto was, if I lose the game, at least I could win the fight, right? And
Heard that.
so,
Heard
so
that.
always competitive. But as I began to get older, not only did I learn social skills, I learned that even in a loss, there's victory,
Mm-hmm.
there's lessons to be learned, there's ways to get better. And one of the things that I carry with this to this very day is never quit, never give up.
Oh, you can't. I mean, you hit it on the head with that. Because when you talked about like the last segment we did when it comes to video games, you don't get that socialization. So there's not necessarily a never quit, never give up socially. There is on a game, but you can end that game and beat that game. There's a way to do that. When you talk
Right.
about in
The
real
cheat
life
code
and
and all
socially,
that.
yeah, in real life and socializing with other people, I mean, not giving up, it's an uphill climb. But that climb teaches you so much on the way up. Whether you get there or not there yet, you learning something along the way each way it goes. So
Right.
I just think that, I think I really wish a lot more kids today were involved in sports, even more so than what they are now. I think way back, because we're a lot older now, but way back in the day, there weren't a lot of kids involved in sports. I think there are more kids involved in sports now, but I don't know if they're involved necessarily for the right reasons, or like what you're talking about. Some of the other issues keep them out of it. It could be educational issues, definitely could be mental health issues, um, could be socioeconomic issues. But I would love to see a lot more kids get involved in sports because it is the microcosm of life.
Well, but here's the thing though. People people pay for what's important for them. So
Yeah,
and I'm not trying
very
to go
true.
off, I'm
Very
not trying
true.
to go off topic. If you can afford a video game, you can afford to get your kids into athletics.
I, I agree with that 100%. You hit the nail on the head with that. But see, now you're talking. I don't want to get off track either. But now we're talking about
It's
parenting.
about values. It's about
Now we're talking about parenting. If I want my kid involved in something that's going to be better for them, then I'm gonna push them in a direction and I'm gonna pay for it and I'm gonna have them get there. If I want something to babysit my kid and I give him a video game, I'm not doing my job.
Right. But it's about where we place our values. Now,
Correct.
here's the thing. In my family, we placed a lot of value on athletics, and we placed a lot of value on education, and we placed a lot of value on church. Right. So it was the and the funny part about it is the only time we got to miss church was if it was for an athletic event. Otherwise,
You win.
we had to be in church.
There you go.
Right. So it's about where we place values. And so the introduction to sports and how kids learn to socialize and all the skill development, we're talking both mentally and physically, is very important simply
Right.
because, like I said before, it is a microcosm of what people are going to face in life. And athletics is a perfect teacher for that.
But if I can piggyback on something you said earlier, the only time you got to miss church was because of a sporting event. And then you
Right.
also said what people, what's important to you, you spend your money on. Well, I think before you spend your money on something, you have to think about it. And before you think about something, you must have paid some kind of attention to it. So when
Right.
it comes down to what we're discussing, like it's mental health and sports, when you have some of these people today, and especially our youth that are having mental health challenges or mental health issues that they're either developing or they already have, and you as a parent know that, or you as a parent maybe have an idea about it but don't see it, you know, using sports as the therapy agent or the agent of resolve for that can be a couple of things. It could be
Okay.
positive. It could be positive. It can help. Sports actually helps a lot of kids with ADHD. I mean, one of the best basketball players ever, or the best basketball player had, was diagnosed with ADHD. There's a lot of
Right.
football players diagnosed with ADHD. There's a lot of football players diagnosed with depression and anxiety disorder. But you don't
Right.
hear about those things. But
Well,
with these kids to do that, if they have that situation, sports can help them out. If you use sports to hide that, that's going to be detrimental for that kid because, like you said, since it's a microcosm, that kid has to interact with coaches, with other players, socially,
right.
and that's going to be tough.
When you said you mentioned hide that, what do you mean by that?
When I say hide that, I mean over. How do I want to better describe? Maybe overcompensate. Maybe kind of hide it under the rug. Slide it under the rug. Utilize something else to kind of cover it up so everybody doesn't see it, but this individual is dealing with something. And with youth, it can come out in the sense of anger. It can come out in the sense of aggression. It can come out in the sense of withdrawn. A lot of kids can shut down when they have some issues. A lot of kids can act out in anger. So some parents would say, put them in football. Put them in a sport that's more aggressive. Well, you can do that, and they may take their aggression out on people, but then it becomes maladaptive, and it comes out in a way where they might really try to hurt somebody outside the rules of the lines.
Right.
And that's when it becomes a problem.
I think that when we get there, that's further down the line, and because that's a very complex thing. And I think
Mm-hmm.
most parents, when kids have depression, ADHD, anxiety, and
Yep.
they're putting their kids into a sport, I think most of them have the intention of using it as a coping skill, which
Correct. Which is a
which is
good thing. Which is a
which
good
is
thing.
absolutely a good thing. However, you're right, when it's misused or when the kids don't excel at it, then what?
Well, that's when the mental health issue may stand out. So when they are involved in something and it starts to stand out, and they may not necessarily know how to deal. They might not necessarily know how to cope. Pressure might get to be too much for them. Maybe they didn't turn out to be as good as they thought they were, or as good as you told them that they were. You
Right.
know, where do they fall back on? Where do they fall back to for support? The parent's going to just possibly push them back out there. Hopefully, that parent will bring them in and kind of teach them, hey, listen, some things are going to go your way, some things aren't. That's sports. But what is
Right.
this mental health component? I mean, what is it? Let's find out what it is, because if we can address that, we can either address it and deal better with it, or address it and resolve it, so the sport and the athletics can come out more, and that mental health issue can be resolved or dealt with better, so it doesn't hinder itself or hinder the sport.
Right. And so there's so many directions that we could take this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to stay online. the intro before I change the subject, the introduction of athletics, what would be a good age to start getting kids to help build this character? What would be a good age?
I would say the age isn't the number isn't necessarily the factor. I would say
Okay.
when a kid can actually play a sport athletically and physically, when they're able to do something correctly, not wrong, when they're able to do it correctly and adequately, get them involved. Get them involved. That's going to boost their confidence. That's going to boost their self-esteem. That can actually help parenting in a lot of ways. I mean, kids are very motivated by sports educationally. I mean, that's actually where you can teach the education component right off the bat.
Right.
You get good grades, you get to play. You don't do well in school and do your homework, you don't get to go to practice as a young kid. Maybe playing AAU or prep football or something like that. So kids are going to want to do that. So they're going to hopefully try a lot harder.
Right.
So I think as soon as they can play, let them play.
I know for me personally, I turned around my academics because I had a goal of going to college to play football. But so right around the eighth, ninth grade, I turned it around, and at that point, my mom didn't have to tell me to study no more. I did it because my goal was to get a college scholarship. But here's something else. What about socially? One of the things that I know growing up in the west side of San Bernardino, and I remember at some point all of us played sports, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether
Mm-hmm.
it was football, baseball, basketball, and then when gang culture came in and selling drugs and all that stuff hit the neighborhood. So what about socially? Can it be a deterrent of kids getting into other trouble? What do you say about that?
Can what be the deterrent? Athletics?
Athletics.
Uh,
What
I,
do you
I
think?
I think getting kids involved in athletics, like I said, early academically, it gets you more involved and gets them more focused. I think as a deterrent, if you get your kids in sports, they will hopefully be so far removed from that negative atmosphere, or
Mm,
they're involved in something so much, so often, so frequently that they're enjoying it with the coach, with friends, being noticed for this and noticed for that, and getting better at it. That when that other ailment comes around, first of all, they're not already involved in it. Second of all, they're not usually around it because they're practicing. And third, when they come down to that time to make that choice, and the parent has been parenting this whole time about school and family and church and your sport, when the other aspects come up that aren't positive for them, they'll look at that and they'll say, okay, look at that's not going to be a good road for me. So let me
right.
stay away from sport.
So here's the question: When does and we're talking and I know we're starting out with young kids and introducing kids to
Mm-hmm.
sports.
Mm-hmm.
When does athletics and sports become too much and becomes a stressor and overbearing to where it is now weighing on the mental health of a kid?
I the way I would answer that is this: when a when a when a child is not doing well in school, when a child is physically fatigued, when a child is withdrawn, and they say, "Look, at what I'm doing is too much," either verbally or you can see it on the kid. I mean, when you weigh too much on youth, one of the first things they do is they sleep. One of the second things they do, if you do your research, second thing they do is they don't eat as well.
Right.
And the third thing they do, which people think would be first, it's not. They don't socialize as much because they're just burnt out. They're fatigued. Now that mental health component will start to set in there because they know that there's an expectation on the sport, but more importantly, they know there's an expectation upon them by their parents. And then they start to put themselves down and challenge themselves. Look, I can't do this. I'm not that good at this. I don't have the energy, and that just starts to weigh and pull them down.
Right. So sometimes maybe either too soon or for whatever reasons,
Mm-hmm.
the sport becomes overbearing
Right.
and it becomes more important the
The
to the
parents.
parent.
Correct.
I think we have to give our kids other options and not force it because athletics and exercise can always be a part of it, but
Right.
not everybody's going to play at a competitive level. So we have to make sure we're giving options and paying attention. So
Agreed.
where the
Agreed.
sport, even at an early age, because there's certain sports like tennis, like golf, even basketball. Well, I guess all of them, minus football, that kids can get to a certain competitive level where at a very early age people are already talking about professional and that they're
Oh yeah.
ready for that next level, especially
Oh yeah.
tennis and golf.
Yeah.
So not maybe not so much basketball and football, but definitely those other sports. There's a lot of pressure at an early age that, oh, this kid is a prospect. But what happens when it becomes more important to the parent, and then now I'm at such a competitive level, and maybe this isn't what I want to do. Maybe, or maybe we took the fun out of it.
That well, see that I was going. That's you took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say that a lot of kids will tell their friends that it's not fun anymore. You know, I'm not enjoying this anymore. Or you'll see it when they're out there on the tennis court or the football and basketball field and basketball court or whatever. They they don't have that same pizzazz. They're not getting fun out of it, and that's when it starts to be detrimental. But I'll say this as a parent, for all the parents out there, give your kids as many options as as you can, but really sit down with your kids and have a conversation. Have some consistent conversation. Hey, what do you like? I mean, do you like, you sit down and watch sports with? You like baseball? You like basketball? Get them outside. Let them try. See what sport they like. Because a lot of parents, and I've dealt with this over time, a lot of parents will, the first sport they get their kids involved in is the sport they play.
Right.
And there's not a parent out there that if they play the sport, they don't want their kid to play their sport. If not so much their sport, their position, their number, they want them to do all that. But you got to ask the kid, because you might ask a kid that you played football. You might ask your son, hey, come on, you're gonna be this. He's like, you know what, Dad, I want to play baseball. Give me baseball. I want to
Right.
play baseball. Well, cater that to the kid and give them, like you said, give them the options to be able to grow and say what their interests are and explain what their interests are and explore them. And that's going to give them a chance to own their own individuality instead of living the parents' individuality through sports and education and everything
And
else.
a lot of times, like you say, that happens naturally.
Mm-hmm.
That happens naturally, but it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be forced.
No,
But
it's just a natural occurrence.
I think when we talk about athletics, and really doesn't matter whether it's, like I said, basketball, football, dance. I mean, dance is a sport, I guess. Um, whatever sport that your child is interested in is making sure that the sport doesn't become more important than the child's needs.
Agreed. Agreed. But that starts out, as we said at the top of the show, that starts out with the parents. If if they understand what they're really trying to accomplish by putting their kids in sports, then
Okay.
you've evaluated the need base.
Right.
If your kid needs an outlet, period. Okay, sports is one, but you've also thought about some others. If your kid
Right.
lacks socialization, okay, sports is a good avenue because they're going to play with other kids.
Right.
So that component is just very important, but you got to do that up front.
Right. And here's why I bring that up is because I think that yes, we're using sports to not only skill development, social development, build character, and allowing them to take it as far as that they want. However, as kids get older, their interests change, their
Mm-hmm.
emotions change, their hormones change, and all of those things. And so we as parents have to change with that.
Correct. Correct. The core makeup of a person is going to pretty much remain the same. But a
Right.
lot of that, all the way from when they're young up through their teens, I mean, up into the early 20s, every person is going to shed like an onion. They're going to shed skin, shed roles, shed levels. But just because they shed something, they're going to add something to it.
Right.
And everything that parents have taught their kids from a young age, that they take what you teach them up into a certain point. Then they take what you've taught them up into a certain point, probably around 8, 9, 10, and they hit middle school. or they hit that seventh, eighth grade mark. And then they take everything that you've taught them and kind of compare it with their social network. And some of the social network they're going to take and keep. Some of the stuff you taught them they're going to take and keep. And then they take that into their early 20s. And what out of that mixture really forms individual at that point. So when we go back to the core of it, talking about mental health and mental wellness of young kids and sports, hoping as a parent, hoping to get your kid involved in sports, I hope each parent evaluates the mental abilities and the stability of their kids, because putting your kid in a sport, they're going to be out there at some point by themselves. The parent's not going to be out there. So that kid's going to have to go through a practice process, a performance process in practice, but also perform in a game setting. So are they mentally tough enough for that? Do they want to do that? Or is that something you want them to do?
And I think that you've already stated it, is that if we're paying attention to why we're doing it,
correct,
what's the purpose, if this desires, and all of those things, then we'll be okay. And I think that as we introduce kids to athletics, understanding that it's still about the kid, right?
Correct. It's always about the kid. It's always about the kid.
There's all of these things that we've already mentioned, and I want to put it in a nutshell before we end this particular first part of this series. I want to put some things, in play, in terms of, we can outline some things. However, as people begin to grow, as people begin to change, and we talk about athletics and mental health, I cannot stress that it is a two-edged sword. And we're going to get more into this, where it is about development, it is about building character, but it also can affect the person's mental health, especially when they're not performing well, especially when they lose their identity as a person, and now they're only being seen as an athlete, and you have to perform at a specific level or you're no good.
No, I'm glad you said that, because this point is that I'm going to try to make here echoes that, hopefully, if I can deliver it the way I want. Children will come out, youth will come out, and when it comes to sports, they will come out and show you basically two things. They'll show you their parents and their home environment, and they'll show you what they've learned about themselves until that point. Some kids will come up to you and tell you, I can't do that. I'm not good at that. But what they will show you is their environment. So when you talk about the mental health stability or presentation of a young person playing sports, you have to take into account their environment, where they come from. And that first place where they come from is home. You mentioned earlier, again, the things that were important in your household. When you went out to play sports, you brought your house.
Yeah.
Okay, so your house was your first place of your mental well-being, or your whole mental package and stability to begin with,
or lack of thereof.
well, hold on. We let's not call it a lack. Everybody comes to the table. But everybody comes to the table with what they come to the table with.
Right.
Some households don't possess certain things. Some households possess other things. Right. So these young kids are going to come out to play sports, yes, but their mental is really what they're bringing from home. Second, it's what they're bringing socially. So when you put them in sports, they're going to show you these things.
Man. And I was really trying to wait for the next couple of episodes to get to this.
Well, I'm just prefacing that for the next episode, so you can now tie that in.
We could preface it, because you're right. Just like with academics, where teachers expect kids to at a certain level, not every kid come from the same social or home environment. It's the same thing with sports. Like, for some kids, that's the only time that they are being told good job. That's the only time that they're being paid attention.
Some
That
kids.
right. That's the only time they're being paid attention to. And those, and I know for a fact some of the kids that I grew up with, and when it came to sports, that even at an early age, that was a necessity.
Well,
That was a
I'll
necessity.
pick. I'll
And
yeah.
and,
I'll
and when,
piggyback on. I'll pick it.
just
I'm
real
sorry. I
quick,
cut you off. I'll piggyback on that. You what you said. If you look at it this way, some kids need good job. Way to go, because they don't get that at home. So they
absolutely
thrive on it from practice.
right,
But when they get home, they suffer because it stops.
right,
Some of them who are in a sport that they don't want to play or not good at, or maybe it's just not working out. They get good job at home, but they get to practice the sport that the parents want them to play, that maybe they didn't choose, or maybe they did choose. And
right,
they don't hear the same thing they hear at home. That doesn't mean home is wrong, but this kid is not able to take a practice session or a game or something where he's not told good job. He's used to hearing it. How
right.
how are they going to process this? How's a young girl going to process this? How's a young man going to process this?
Ab-
Maybe they drop out.
I've seen some of for myself and my kids and
Mm-hmm.
nieces and all that stuff. We try to be encouraging, but then all of a sudden that sports arena, so to speak, they're not being praised. That weighs on the mental health.
It, well,
They're, they're
well,
not being told good job. They're being told they're not good
correct,
enough and all that stuff. So
correct.
so now, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I mean, correct. And you don't even have to tell them they're not doing good enough. Just not getting the praise at home that the coach was given.
Right.
I come home and I'm like, okay, I'm listening, I'm waiting for it. And maybe the parents went to practice, and when they come home, the kid doesn't hear it. They're like, well, maybe my parents aren't that happy. Or, like where we grew up, there's a lot of kids who go to practice. Your parents don't even go to practice and seldom even go to games.
Games.
Exactly. So this kid's getting great praise from his teammates and the coaches, but the kid comes home and it stops. It stops. So how do they develop an identity? Like there's a lot
Right.
of talk in mental health about identity issues and role conflicts and things like that. Your identity is established when you're young. You
Yeah.
develop it and work on it as you grow, but it's established when you're very young.
Very young. Right. And so here's, and we could go back and forth on this because, like I said, we have two more shows, and just to let the people know, we're sort of starting out with the intro of athletics. Then we're going to talk about high school, well, middle school, high school, college, and then professional level in terms of how mental health is affected by athletics and so forth. What are some of the things, some key points you want to leave with the folks that we talked to today? Just real quick, and then I'll add to it.
I just a couple of key points I would hit on is really really giving your children a chance to be themselves. Give kids a chance to be themselves and get them into something that they would like to get into. And that's first and foremost. And second, as far as their mental health is concerned, give them that outlet in athletics, but make sure you're around them to get that real outlet from them about what they're getting at home or what they're
Right.
getting socially and what they're getting from athletics. Be that sounding board and a pin cushion for them so they can bring home to outside and outside back to home. Because if you
Right.
don't give them both sides, they're going to choose one eventually.
Right. And what I would add to that, especially for younger kids, make sure it remains fun.
Correct.
I knew how many fights we would see of parents at baseball games, football games, basketball games.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I get living vicariously through your kids, but nobody got drafted out of damn pee wee football. Make sure that it remains fun. Make sure that it remains. I personally don't believe in that, should all kids have a good experience? Sure. But, nowadays everybody gets everybody should get a trophy, that the whole thing where till a certain age, it's really non-competitive. Okay, I get it. It is what it is. Making sure that it remains fun, but also make sure that your motive for including kids into athletics is positive or correct. I don't know if I want to use the term correct, but
That's positive is right.
because athletics is a microcosm of society and what they're going to face in society. And just making sure it remains fun, making sure you stay involved, making sure that they remain balanced, and that it plays a positive role in their development, not a negative role in their development.
Agreed. Agreed.
Any
Just and
any final? Go ahead.
no, I would just add, just like you said, make sure it's balanced, but make sure there's a goal that they understand that it's playing sports is not just about sports.
Right.
Please teach them early that sports is going to teach you a lot about other things as well. You
Absolutely.
know, you're gonna build friendships, you're gonna build relationships, you're gonna learn how to get through tough times, you're gonna learn how to win, with respect and pride. You're gonna have to lose the same way.
Right.
But at the same time, you're gonna learn a lot about authority. You're gonna learn about respect. You're gonna learn a lot about limitations. And
Absolutely.
as we get into this, talking about mental health later, boundaries. These kids are gonna learn boundaries. Some of these kids don't have boundaries at home.
Right.
So, you know,
It's funny because a lot of the kids, especially boys that I see in my practice, they and I'm gonna continue to pick on video games, but zero boundaries. They don't have boundaries, and that's part of it. And here's the thing: we'll say they're 8 or 9, will compete with a 5-year-old, five
mhm.
year old sibling to take stuff away, and will cry or get upset because the 5-year-old has something. Put him in sports and let him get something taken away from him and see what happens. He's gonna have to
No, I,
develop. He's gonna have to
yeah.
regulate the emotion.
Uh-huh. And see, like we said earlier, that home, that home is the first place he learned
Right.
either to do that or not to do that because he has some kind of guidance.
Put him in sports to see what happens.
Well, here's the thing: if you put that kid that you just described in sports, he's going to act that same way, but the
Right.
environment and the outcome is not going to be the same.
The environment's gonna he's gonna have to adjust or not.
Now,
So
when we talked about earlier, how's this young person going to develop?
well,
And that leads you into your next segment.
right. So we're gonna cut it off there. Like I said, this is a 3-part series. And I think it's very important, especially as we're coming out of quarantine. I see a lot of kids signing up for football or getting ready for football and things like that. And signups are happening and so forth. So I thought this would be a good topic, but also what we're seeing nationally in the media is these high level world class athletes shining a light on mental health, and that's where we're going to end up in our 3-part series.
Yeah.
Is how the mental health is, even as star athletes, and we're going to get there. So before we go, any final words, young sir?
No, I have no final words. Thanks. It's been good. I look forward to the upcoming shows because we have a lot to touch on, and just to connect the dots for everybody. So I hope everybody tunes in and continues through the whole series because it's going to be fantastic. So just tune in.
Absolutely. So